cold February morning in 2007, the quiet routine of Washington Township, Michigan, was shattered by a chilling discovery. A woman walking her dog in the local park stumbled upon something out of place, a black nylon bag wedged deep in the hollow of a tree. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than discarded trash. But as she lifted it, a strange metallic smell and a streak of what appeared to be blood sent a jolt of fear through her. She put the bag down, her hands trembling, and dialed 911. When officers arrived on the scene, they quickly sealed off the area. The bag's contents would turn a missing person search into a full-scale homicide investigation. But what brought this violence to such an ordinary suburb? Who was the victim, and who wanted them gone? This would mark the beginning of a case that would haunt the community for years to come. A case that would uncover secrets behind closed doors, fractured relationships, and a facade of suburban perfection crumbling under the weight of hidden tensions. As detectives traced the evidence back from the park to a quiet cul-de-sac just a few miles away, the story began to unfold. A wife, a husband, 2 young children. A seemingly stable family, until one of them vanished. Behind the walls of their 4-bedroom home, something had gone terribly wrong, but on that day, standing in the frozen mud, the officers had no idea just how deep the tragedy would go. The only thing they knew for certain, someone's life had ended violently, and the search for answers had only just begun. Rewind. Portrait of the victim, marriage, and work. To understand the tragedy, we must step back in time, to the life of Tara Lynn Grant. Born June 28, 1972 in Macomb County, Michigan, Tara was the kind of person people described as driven and ambitious. She excelled in school, earning a business degree from Michigan State University, and built a promising career as an executive at Washington Group International. Her job often took her far from home, Puerto Rico, Europe, long weeks on the road. But with each achievement, Tara seemed to climb higher, becoming not just a role model for her colleagues, but the main breadwinner for her family. Her personal life on the surface was just as impressive. In 1996, she married Stephen Grant. Together, they bought a new house in an up-and-coming neighborhood, a spacious 4-bedroom home that promised the American dream. Soon, their family grew. Lindsay was born in 2000, Ian in 2002. Friends and neighbors saw the Grants as fortunate, even enviable. But, as is so often the case, appearances hid more than they revealed. Stephen, Tara's husband, struggled with his own insecurities. With Tara away on frequent business trips, he became the primary caregiver for the children, a role that clashed with his expectations of himself and of marriage. He resented Tara's success, sometimes voicing suspicions of infidelity. Stephen's frustration simmered beneath the surface, manifesting in controlling behaviors, checking Tara's emails, questioning her about late-night calls, and feeling threatened whenever her boss contacted her on weekends. Yet, from the outside, everything seemed perfect. 2 children, a thriving career, a beautiful home in a safe neighborhood. But in this portrait of suburban stability, cracks had already begun to form. Family, friends, and even those closest to Tara would later wonder. Were there signs they'd missed? Was there a moment when the tide could have turned? And so, beneath the veneer of normalcy, the storm was quietly gathering strength. Cracks beneath the surface, tensions and warning signs. As weeks turned into months, the stresses inside the Grant household only deepened. To those on the outside, Stephen and Tara maintained the image of a typical suburban couple, juggling the demands of parenting and work. But behind closed doors, a silent battle played out. A battle of pride, suspicion, and wounded egos. Stephen Grant's discomfort with his role as Mr. Mom grew more pronounced. Tara's constant travel and her success in the corporate world became a source of resentment, fueling Stephen's insecurities. He became convinced that Tara was having an affair. The seeds of doubt took root, and Stephen's behaviors shifted from anxious to controlling. He installed software to monitor Tara's email correspondence, often confronting her about messages from colleagues or her boss. Their arguments, once rare, now erupted whenever Tara's phone buzzed late at night or on weekends. Yet it wasn't only jealousy that changed the dynamic at home. Just 6 weeks before the tragedy, the Grants welcomed a live-in au pair, Verena Dirks, an 18-year-old from Germany. What was meant to be an extra set of hands for a busy family quickly evolved into something more complicated. Stephen soon began an affair with Dirks, further warping the delicate balance of trust and loyalty in the household. Family and friends later recalled Stephen's odd behavior, boasting about his family while simultaneously airing grievances, withdrawing from relatives, refusing help, even lying to save face. He grew obsessed with Tara's extended absences, voicing complaints to anyone who would listen, yet shutting down when pressed for details. The pressures of parenting, combined with the pain of feeling second best in his own home, seemed to push him further into isolation. Looking back, the warning signs had been there all along. Flashes of anger, episodes of control, hints of paranoia. But few recognized them for what they were, red flags of a crisis about to break. In the weeks leading up to that cold February night, the foundation of the Grant family had begun to crumble, leaving a trail of clues. Tragically, would only make sense in hindsight. The night of the crime, a timeline unfolds. Friday night, February 9th, 2007. By all accounts, an ordinary winter evening in Washington Township. Tara Grant had just returned from a week-long business trip to Puerto Rico. She was tired, but there was no time to relax. Luggage in hand, she moved briskly through the house, preparing for another trip just days away. The tension in the air was almost palpable. Stephen watched as Tara unpacked, her mind already on the next flight. The smallest spark ignited an argument, a familiar script between husband and wife. This time, the subject was Tara's demanding job and the weekend calls from her boss. Voices rose, accusations flew. According to Stephen's later confession, things escalated quickly. In a moment of rage and wounded pride, Tara allegedly slapped Stephen. What happened next would forever change the course of 2 lives. Stephen claimed he pushed Tara, sending her crashing to the floor. Overcome by a surge of anger and desperation, he pressed down, his hands closing around her throat. Minutes dragged into eternity. When it was over, Tara was gone. As if in a trance, Stephen wrapped her face with a shirt and sat in silence, the reality sinking in. But the nightmare had only begun. Stephen dragged Tara's body into the garage, using a belt as a makeshift harness. He frantically texted Dirks, the young au pair, urging her not to come home. But fate intervened. Dirks returned anyway, oblivious to what had just transpired. In the days that followed, Stephen set about constructing a story, leaving voicemails on Tara's phone, pretending she'd left on her own. By morning, panic set in. Stephen transported Tara's remains to his father's tool and paint shop. There, seeking courage and a bottle of liquor, he made a harrowing decision, dismembering Tara's body into 14 parts. Some evidence was destroyed, scattered to mislead investigators. That night, He loaded the bags onto a snowmobile and headed for the park, digging shallow graves beneath the frozen earth. In a matter of hours, a family's life was destroyed, and a chilling cover-up had begun, one that would unravel piece by piece under the scrutiny of investigators. The investigation, witnesses, forensics, and eliminating theories. Valentine's Day, 2007. 5 days had passed since anyone had seen Tara Lynn Grant. It was only then that Stephen Grant called police to report his wife missing. His story? He claimed he last saw Tara stepping into a dark-colored car, talking on her phone, as if heading out to start a new life. But when detectives checked her phone records, they found no such call had ever been made. The story was already falling apart. Investigators dug deeper into Tara's finances and travel history. There were no credit card transactions, no plane tickets, no activity that pointed to her leaving voluntarily. For detectives, the missing persons scenario began to look more and more like a calculated ruse. Suspicion shifted sharply towards Stephen. Stephen's own behavior only added fuel to the fire. Friends and family noted fresh scratches on his arms and hands. His demeanor was restless, evasive. When asked to take a polygraph test, Stephen refused, unless it was administered by someone he chose. He skipped out on community search efforts, hiring a private investigator as if to create a facade of concern. Every move seemed designed to keep police at bay, not help them find his wife. The first breakthrough came when a woman discovered that fateful nylon bag in the park. Inside, gloves, tiny metal shavings, and a telltale bloodstain. Forensic analysis confirmed the blood belonged to Tara. Suddenly, the park, a quiet, wooded space just miles from the Grant home, became the epicenter of the investigation. Search teams scoured the grounds and unearthed more remains, each grim discovery tightening the net around Stephen. Piece by piece, the evidence told its own story. The physical clues, the shallow graves, the blood, the metal fragments, all pointed back to one place, the Grant household. The missing person narrative no longer held up. Now, detectives were dealing with something far darker. The question was no longer, where is Tara? But who could do this and why? The turning point. A breakthrough and a confession. By early March, the walls were closing in. On March 2, 2007, detectives returned to the Grant home, this time with a search warrant. Inside the garage, near a stack of children's toys, they discovered a large, tightly wrapped bundle sealed in layers of plastic. When investigators opened it, the reality struck with undeniable force. It was a torso, still clothed, unmistakably belonging to Tara Lynn Grant. The discovery shattered any remaining illusions. Confronted with this grim evidence, Stephen Grant did what many suspected he would. He ran. Grabbing his dog, he slipped out of the house and vanished into the icy Michigan night. Police launched a massive manhunt, scouring the surrounding woods and state parks. For 2 days, Stephen remained on the run, his disappearance a last, desperate act in an unraveling story. But the flight couldn't last. On March 4th, Stephen was found shivering, exhausted, and suffering from hypothermia in a remote state park in northern Michigan. Brought to a hospital for treatment, he finally broke his silence. There, with detectives and doctors present, Stephen confessed to everything. He described the fight, the fatal struggle, and the horrifying decisions made in the aftermath. One name surfaced again: Verena Dirks, the family's young German au pair. In a surprising move, Stephen had called Dirks from his hiding place, telling her he accidentally killed Tara. Dirks, who had already returned to Germany, immediately flew back to Michigan to cooperate with authorities. Her testimony would help fill in the missing pieces of the timeline and confirm Stephen's actions in the days after the crime. The truth was out. The case, once tangled in rumors and speculation, had found its answer. But as Stephen sat in custody, one question still hung in the air. What would justice look like for a family so thoroughly broken, and for the community left in shock? The trial and the verdict. In February 2008, the eyes of Michigan, and much of the nation, turned to the courtroom as Stephen Grant finally faced justice. The trial was a painful, public airing of a family's darkest secrets. Prosecutors laid out the evidence in methodical detail: the calculated deception, the forensics, the desperate attempt to cover up the crime. Every step Stephen took after Tara's death, dismembering her body, scattering the remains, creating a false trail, painted a portrait not of panic, but of cold, deliberate action. The defense, for their part, tried to argue the crime was an accident, an argument that found little sympathy with the jury. Witnesses recounted Stephen's strange behavior in the days after Tara vanished. His refusal to join searches, his inconsistent stories, his sudden disappearance once the evidence closed in. Verena Dirks, the au pair at the center of so much speculation, took the stand. Her testimony providing crucial context for the events leading up to the murder and the days that followed. After weeks of testimony, the verdict was clear. Stephen Grant was found guilty of second-degree murder, sentenced to 50 to 80 years in prison. On top of that, he received an additional 6 to 10 years for the dismemberment and tampering with a body. For the families of both Tara and Stephen, the sentence offered a measure of closure, but no real comfort. Two children, Lindsay and Ian, were left without their mother, and in truth, without their father as well. Outside the courtroom, reporters asked if justice had truly been served. Could any sentence ever repair the damage, erase the trauma, or bring back what was lost? The judge's words echoed in the silence. This is a tragedy from which no one emerges unscathed. And as Stephen Grant was led away, the shadow of his actions lingered over everyone who had once called the Grants their friends, their neighbors, their family. Aftermath and message. The sentence had been delivered, but the true cost of what happened inside the Grant home was just beginning to surface. For Lindsay and Ian, the trauma was immediate and profound. In the span of a single night, they lost both parents, one to a violent act, the other to a prison cell. The siblings were taken in by family, who soon made a painful decision. They changed the children's last names, hoping to shield them from the shadow that now hung over the Grant name. But changing a name could never erase the memories. The tragedy rippled outward. Stephen's father, who owned the tool and paint shop where parts of Tara's body were hidden, could not bear the weight of his son's crime. In June 2008, just a year after Stephen's conviction, he took his own life. Neighbors and relatives looked back on the events and wondered if there had ever been a way to intervene, a moment when someone could have changed the ending. Years later, new revelations surfaced. Both children had witnessed fragments of that terrible night, but were too scared, too confused, to speak out until after the trial. Their silence, born from shock and fear, added yet another layer of heartbreak to the case. The story of Tara Lynn Grant is not just about a crime. It's about the subtle ways violence and control can grow inside a home. In hindsight, the warning signs had been there: jealousy, controlling behavior, electronic monitoring, emotional isolation. These are the red flags that too often go unnoticed until it is too late. The case stands as a somber reminder. When these signals appear, intervention is not just necessary, it may be the only thing that prevents tragedy from spiraling out of control. In the end, the Grant case remains a cautionary tale, one that urges us to look closer, listen more carefully, and never ignore the quiet cries for help that may be hiding in plain sight. The Tara Lynn Grant case exposed the dark reality behind a seemingly perfect suburban life, a successful executive, a troubled marriage, a shocking act of violence, and a community forever changed. From the chilling discovery in a Michigan park to a desperate confession and heartbreaking aftermath, this case is a sobering reminder of the warning signs that often go unnoticed until it's too late. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our channel for more true crime cases that need to be heard. Every voice helps keep these stories alive and reminds us all to look out for the signs before tragedy strikes again.